My name is Tim Bushhausen. You don't know me unless you met me at one of the online universities I went to, Colorado Technical University. I got the master's degree in information management. It's virtually identical to the master's degree that they offer in project management, the only difference being the first course, which I think I took a better first course. I took one in leadership rather than the first one in the project management major, and that's what got me interested in going on to Walden University. I actually enrolled in Walden University doctoral program in 2007, September 2007. That would be about 5 years ago. Well, 6 years ago. Okay, so it's been a while. But that's what I got to be interested in. As a matter of fact, I got to be interested in leadership the day I started that class. So I suppose from my first day of graduate school, leadership has been my favorite subject. Simultaneously, when I was getting the master's degree at Colorado Technical University, I was also attending online at American Intercontinental University. Don't try that at home. Those are both real master's programs, and you get a real master's degree. AIU is way accelerated. It's even faster than CTU. CTU took me about 15 months. AIU took me less than 12, maybe 10 months, I don't remember exactly. But AIU, I studied information technology. So I got information security both from a management and a technological point of view. From there, I just, going back further, I suppose you may have met me at Antioch College. That would the year I graduated from there was 76. I didn't go to the Yellow Springs Ivy League campus. I suppose maybe that would have put me with the rich kids, but we were part of Dixon. The President Dixon of Antioch at that time had an outreach program for, what do they call it, non-dominant culture. Actually, I think that's what we called ourselves. So what Nick Dixon called us was probably disadvantaged or some such. They use those kind of terms. But it was their outreach program. And he had this concept called the network, which was a pretty great one. I suppose it became the university, Antioch University, which is, Antioch College is still there, but I believe Antioch University is much larger than that now, and I believe that they're still spread out in different places around the country. So Antioch University originated with the Antioch Network and a visionary by the name of Dixon. Anyway, that program was in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and that's where I really first started learning on an academic basis. I suppose I've been learning ever since. Antioch College, if anything, turned me into a lifetime learner because their focus was on experiential education. So the first thing we did was summarize what we learned from experience. Actually, half of the credits I got from them were called experiential credits. The other half were actually earned in the classroom. It doesn't matter how many credits you get, really. What's that? What is a college credit anyway? You know, that was one of our big focuses at Antioch, and it comes to find out that a college credit is X amount of time spent in a classroom. And as my sister is now learning, she's only a few years younger than I am, and I'm getting pretty green around the gills, but those credits don't do you much good when you transfer schools. The new school is going to dust half of your credits anyway. Throw at least a third of them in the garbage and make you do it over again. So it's supposed to be some kind of a standardization of academic labor, but and I guess it functions. It has its advantages, the credit system, for people who want credit for what they do. Actually, I got more than enough credit because I now owe. Who do I owe the money to? I suppose it's the federal government by now, because the bankers, you got to understand, they always guarantee. They always make sure they get paid. But I owe somebody a couple $100,000. As far as I'm concerned, they should give me $200,000 more so that I can go back to school and finish my doctoral research project. But neither here nor there. I thank them for providing me with the motivation and whatever little guidance they did give me, because I did learn how to do academic research. The problem with research is that, especially if it's academic research, is that it's not action research. And one thing that Walden University wants you to do is be a theory practitioner. So they actually want action research, but I'm not so sure that that's not just a hypocritical oath that they take, sort of like the Hippocrates oath, I suppose. But whether or not that's real is another good question. I suppose we could get into that. But one could say, although I'm not enrolled officially anymore, because I'm not making any more student loans. They've already guaranteed as many loans as they will, and I haven't made any money to pay them back yet. I have actually no intention of making any money to pay them back, and if I do make the money, I have no intention of paying them back. That doesn't mean that they won't get it if I make it, but it does mean that I'm going to do my best to probably become a Kennedy. One of the known facts about the Kennedy family is that they never paid a dime to the Kopechne family. Well, why not? I mean, Ted Kennedy, as wonderful as he was as a senator, he certainly came the closest to hypocritically representing we the people as anybody from his class possibly could. But he, in fact, left Mary Jo Kopechne drowning in 2 inches of water and swam away from the scene like an Olympic swimmer. Well, anywhere else in the world, that would be worth, to say the least, a serious civil suit. Well, why didn't the Kennedys pay a lot of money to the Kopechne family? It's real simple. The Kennedys are indigent. They are officially indigent. They live on stipends, and the stipends come from their trust funds, and their trust funds are in the Cayman Islands. Well, I'll tell you what, if and when I have the need to do that, I've learned enough about management at this point that I think I can manage my money at least as well as the Kennedys do. So, for those of you who would like to collect from me, all I can say is lots of luck. I'll give you a piece of advice, though, because it may work, it may not. I don't know. You'll have to actually dig up my grave to find out. But I would like to go to my grave with various envelopes on me addressed to various creditors with the amount of cash that I owe them stuffed inside the envelopes. And you know what? You can get it out of my cold, dead hands. That's the only way you're going to get any money from me. So, if it's not there, it's not there. That just means that I didn't realize one of my minor goals. Actually, my major goals have been to develop my intellect. I've been doing that all my life, and those silly degrees aided me in formalizing the way I do things, but they didn't really motivate me to do it. They certainly didn't provide me with the worldview that I started with. And that hasn't changed, actually. I think that question of worldview is going to be very important because it has a lot to do with what I'm doing here, and it has a lot to do with why I'm not over there. Worldview. Well, it takes a little bit of philosophy to get into worldview, unfortunately, because the world is extremely complex. I was just listening to a guy. As a matter of fact, I'm going to. He's an excellent historian, and I'm going to be back up here with some summaries and remarks about his readings of recent history, and I just can't wait to do that because I love to let somebody else do the historical digging, and then I can do the philosophizing. Not that I don't know how to do the digging, but it's actually more fun to sit back and philosophize than it is to dig. Anyway, he explained the reality that, as he said, we all live in the same reality, and that's true. We all do live in the same reality, but we don't all perceive reality in the same way. He didn't dig into this a whole lot. I think he did mention maps of reality, but maps can be awfully misleading, as it were. You can have a map, but that doesn't mean that it's going to get you where you want to go. If it's a good map, maybe it will, but a map is always an abstraction. I remember at Walden University, we did one of our, well, they call it a residency. It's similar to a doctor's residency, okay? Every doctoral program has to have a residency, so this is the way Walden did their residencies. But anyway, I was at my first Walden residency, and they gave us a paper to read that basically it was a research paper, and it ostensibly proved that the American people have the same reality maps, but different value systems. And I read it, and I was probably the only one there at that time who read it the way I did. At least I was the only one that got up and spoke. I'm not sure if anybody's read it the way I did from that day since, but for crying out loud, I mean, the paper proved exactly the opposite of what the paper showed, and it used DreamWorks, collective unconsciousness, some other concepts. I don't remember exactly what all was involved, but the paper proved, in fact, that we have different maps of reality. Newt Gingrich and I could probably check in on the same level when it comes to our value systems. Maybe not exactly the same, but it depends on how far you go into value systems. As a matter of fact, I could get into that right now, but we might save that for a few minutes, because talking about worldviews, basically I'm with Howard Zinn. I mean, people have criticized Howard Zinn for being biased. Well, guess what? We're all biased. I think that that's one of the things that, what do they call it? Postmodernism has discovered. Modernism came in with the Enlightenment, and the Enlightenment pretended to be objective. I go over that in all of my actual doctoral research, this definition of objectivity. And of course, the more I dug, the more I found out that all the work's already been done for me, and they've been doing it, the researchers have been doing it during all of these years since 1976, and I've been out of school. So, I finally go back to school in, 2006, something thereabout, and didn't even start digging into all of that because I was busy studying technical stuff on the master's level, but I didn't get to the advanced level until I was permitted to quit studying other people and start thinking for myself, and that was on the doctoral level. Well, on the doctoral level, I come to find out that the more I think I'm doing something original, the more I think I'm being original, the more I find out that somebody else has already been there and done that. Well, what do you know? I'm still not at the cutting edge of knowledge. I don't know if I'll ever get there. To tell you the truth of the matter, I might have to be at Area 51 to really be at the cutting edge of knowledge. Who knows what they know? Who knows what they can do? One of the things that probably more than anything else bumped me out of the doctoral program, and yeah, I blame it on them for not lending me enough money, but let's face it, if I had done what they told me to do and followed their instructions, I'd be Dr. Tim right now. That was my whole thing, be Dr. Tim. Well, I couldn't find out I can call myself Dr. Tim anyway. So, guess what? I'm Dr. Tim. As long as I don't practice medicine, there's no pretension about that. I'm actually got more to say and more to offer and a much larger knowledge base than any of the doctors I met at Walden University. Not that I don't respect them. That's not the problem. I respect them, but on the other hand, I really can't be one of them. And well, we'll find out the reason for that if we explore that a little bit further. But I'll never be one of them. I mean, that's been my problem all my life. They made offers to me to be one of them ever since I got out of Antioch. But the first thing they want to know is who you are, what you believe. Well, if you've got a black wife, you're automatically not one of them. If you take the viewpoint of the wretched of the earth, you're definitely not one of them. You're never going to be one of them. So, and the thing is, you really got to accept their values because they're going to know. When you join their private clubs and start playing golf with them and sitting back and relaxing with them and going to their Illuminati meetings, maybe even getting recruited to join their private ruling class clubs that actually do the ruling, you're going to find out that they don't want you if you're not one of them. And they're going to know. They're going to know because it's too hard to live a lie. It really is. And I don't want to. I really don't. I wanted to get as much out of their definition of objectivity as I could, but I also wanted to find out what's the difference between what's really objective and what's not. And that's where worldview comes in. Now, I already had a background in this because I actually went to a meeting in Los Angeles, California. I've been very fortunate, more so than most. Some people claim, oh, well, you've really been fortunate. But me, I don't know. I've had a muse, I guess, that's guided my intellectual development even before I even knew her name, Athena, by the way. But she put me in the right place at the right time for an awful lot of things. I came out of the 60s, but in 74 I actually went to a meeting. It was a community meeting on malathion. They were spraying malathion on West Hollywood, which kind of is the ghetto of Hollywood. But malathion is the last people that the last insecticide that those people needed to have sprayed on them. I mean, you might as well be spraying Zyklon B on them while you're at it, for that matter. Malathion is nasty stuff, but it was all about the fruit fly, and the fruit fly, the Mexican fruit fly, was the biggest threat to the farmers at that time. Well, I went to that meeting for a very specific purpose, because by 74 I had emerged from the New Left. No, 84. That was 84. I had emerged from the New Left, and I had left it behind a long time ago, basically because it disintegrated over the issue of who gets to be the leader. But I really wanted to get back active at something, and I knew that if there was anybody on the left who was worth a damn, they'd be out there selling a newspaper at that big, huge monster community meeting. And I went there. There were several thousand people there. One of the great exhibits was this moron up in front, busy. I think it was probably a bottle of water, drinking malathion and bathing in it. You know, these are the kind of people that they put in front of you. Sort of like when I was studying insurance, we had Colin Powell. We actually went to see Colin Powell as a motivational speaker. Colin Powell? I mean, now there may have been some good, wonderful motivational speakers, and maybe he's one of them. I don't know. But one thing I do know is that I wasn't going to be motivated by Colin Powell. So, or for that matter, by this fool with the mallet fan. But when I came out, I met this woman. She had the handle. Her name was Michelle Landau. I don't know if that's her real name or not, but that's the name she gave me. But she was selling news and letters, newspapers out in front of the meeting, and I really went there to meet her. I didn't know who I would meet, but she was it. That was my purpose for being there. I remember I was wearing a security guard uniform because that's what I was doing in those days. I was doing security work. Had my Antioch degree, but when you go to California with nothing more than a few dollars in your pocket, you're not likely to be functioning at the upper levels of the California economy very soon. Well, about all I ever did in California, other than temporary work, I believe I learned how to be a temp out there pretty good. I was secretary, those kind of things, proofreader, editor. But I had on my security guard uniform, so naturally she thought I was there to harass her. I bought 25 cents. I bought a copy of News and Letters, and from that day to this, I suppose you could say I've been a Marxist humanist, among other things. Marxist humanism is the philosophy with a dash. You got to take the dash on Marxist humanism because that's Raya Dunayevskaya's contribution, and that's what distinguishes her from, say, Raisa Gorbachev. Raisa Gorbachev reached out to the youth to muster them into the party to lead, whatever party or however you reformulated it. The fact of the matter is, it was still always and always will be the party to lead. Raya Dunayevskaya, by putting the dash in Marxist humanism, became the continuator of the humanism of Marx for the 21st century. So the News and Letters Committee was just beginning to get her stuff out there into the public eye back in '84. Dunayevskaya died a few years later. I think that was in '87 that she died. I'm not sure, '86 or '87, but she was Leon Trotsky's secretary, and she came out in 1947. It actually started with the Stalin, the breakover Stalin. Stalin made his deal. What did they call it? The Hitler-Stalin pact. He made his pact with the devil, and Trotsky, even though he'd been exiled from the Russian Revolution, and even though the general staff for the Russian Revolution had been murdered from Stalin, Trotsky wasn't prepared to, and never did say that Stalin was actually the face of the counter-revolution in Russia. Well, when he was seen shaking hands with Hitler, thereby giving the green light to World War II, which the foundations for that had been laid by the bankers at the end of World War I. But nevertheless, the green light was signaled when Hitler realized he would no longer need to commit troops to an eastern front and could therefore attack Western Europe, which is what he proceeded to do. Over that, Dunayevskaya, she was Leon Trotsky's secretary and bodyguard at the time, but she broke with Leon Trotsky and came up with the state capitalist thesis. Well, at some point after she left Mexico, she was, and I don't really know Dunayevskaya's personal history, but she was in the Johnson Forrest tendency of the Socialist Workers' Party, based on, I believe, organizing work in the coal mines, especially the coal miners' strike in West Virginia in 49 and 50. So she came out of that, and she was basically realized that state capitalism, capitalist statism, it doesn't matter what you call it. It's all financed by the same bankers. It's all socialism. It's all totalitarianism. It's all whatever you want it to call it. And none of it involves sharing the wealth. So that's what Dunayevskaya understood. So she wrote an elegant, beautiful article on state capitalism. You can find it on the internet, news and letters. As the internet came out, they established a wonderful presence there. And they've also managed to get her books published everywhere. Dunayevskaya is, in fact, a continuator of Marxism Marxist humanism for the 21st century. One of the things that she did that was so important is she created the category of post-Marx Marxism as a pejorative. So post-Marx Marxist, starting with Engels, she would have little to do with. There were others, Lukács, there were critical Marxists. Mannheim, he's one of the people that I analyzed in my work, Karl Mannheim, and there were other critical Marxists, but the idea of developing a critical edge of Marxism against itself, Marx didn't have time to do that. That wasn't for his era, but it was certainly necessary for anyone who wanted to follow in the legacy that he left. Well, they all became counter-revolutionaries, and that's why they were so easily able to take off their little red hats and start buying up Porsche dealerships in Russia. Basically, that's what they wanted to do anyway. That was what do they call it? New thinking. No, it wasn't perestroika. Glasnost, maybe Glasnost. Anyway, the whole idea of the new thinking was, hey, we know more about capitalism than the capitalists do. We can do this. This is easy. So they wanted to get rich, and they already were rich. I mean, it's not like you have to be a banker to command the highest levels of an economy, but they were having their problems with their command and control economy, just like General Motors and all of our capitalists are having theirs today. Well, their problems were a little more advanced. They came up a bit sooner than here, so they collapsed first. But it was primarily, it started with, of course, Vorkuta, the 1954 revolts in the gulags, the slave labor camps of the Russians, and East Germany. They've always had people rebelling against totalitarianism. As a matter of fact, you're not going to establish a new, you rulers are not going to establish a new totalitarianism without rebellion. And I know you know that. That's why you want to put microchips on all of us. Well, all of us that survive the oncoming deluge, you don't even have to plan, you know it's coming, so why not just wait for it and let it sweep most of us away? Afterwards, whoever's left, I suppose, will be available for a microchip. That's your plan. It's not the plan that we're going to let happen, and I doubt that you know that. But anyway, this isn't for you anyway. Go back to your golf game. The fundamental thing you need philosophically, and you get certainly Dunayevskaya, this is her legacy, coming out of the Johnson Forest tendency. Uh, Johnson was actually CLR James. Freddie Johnson was Raya Dunayevskaya, and Grace Lee Boggs laid the foundation for the state capitalist thesis. But to be Marxist humanism, especially with the dash in it, it takes a little more than that, because you got to go to the implications of the state capitalist thesis. If capitalist statism or state capitalism is no different wherever you go, that implies that there are, in fact, two worlds in each country. Well, the two worlds thesis is fundamentally important, because without that, all you're going to see is shadows. It's very similar to Plato's allegory of the cave, and in my research, that's what I found out. You know, I'm looking at reality, and when you look at the real history of what went on, it's kind of hard to avoid eventually becoming a conspiracy theorist. I mean, I came off out of the left, so nobody has less use for conspiracy theory than the left. I mean, the left wants to show that, at least the new left wanted to show that everything is material. And the whole world is a material world, kind of like the material girl. And ideas really aren't that important as far as ruling realities, especially individuals. So they're going to poo-poo any great man theory, and just like most of your historians, I suppose. On the other hand, there are the great man historians who think that the only thing out there is ideas. I don't even know if they can call themselves historians or not. Karl Mannheim, one of the people I analyzed his Ideology and Utopia, that was very inspirational to me, because he showed that ideology, there's basically 5 of them in Western society. There's 5 basic fundamental ideologies that interact and drive the social system forward. So today is when tomorrow's utopia gets transformed into yesterday's ideology. That's basically Mannheim. But what Mannheim did do is provide a critical edge for Marxism. It's interesting because when you go to a graduate school of business such as Walden, especially the silver standard schools, which Walden is, and also including the gold standard schools, which are strictly brick and mortar, but either way, you're going to run into Mannheim. Mannheim is big time at universities, graduate schools of business. To get back to the two worlds thesis, though, these ideologies basically get distributed between 2 different worlds, and that's the world of the rulers and the world of the ruled. That's what Howard Zinn was doing when he came up with a new way of doing history. He was looking at everything from the point of view of the ruled. When they arrested, and I think they sent him to prison for, what was it, 32 months. He did quite a bit of time in the booby hitch, or behind bars, as it were, whatever you want to call it. For what? For, I think Oliver Wendell Holmes put it this way, striking the sword of freedom from the hand of democracy while she defends herself against foreign enemies, some such nonsense that shows you how totalitarian even the most well-intentioned Democrat. And why is that? Why is that? Well, that's one of the things I want to get into. Why is this? All of these so-called pretentious democracies. Why are they nothing more than pretensions? I mean, even the Russians pretended to be democratic. They all had some sense in which they adopted the word democracy and republican, but yet they were all totalitarian. Well, our rulers were no less hypocritical than theirs, because there are in fact two worlds in each country. And if you don't remember that, as I alluded to before, all you're going to see are shadows. You're going to see the shadows on the wall of Plato's cave, and you're not going to see what in fact is going on. What you're looking at there is not ideology. In this case, they came up with a way to sell ideology to the masses, the ruling class ideology especially. That was Edward Bernays. He was a very, very wealthy fellow. He was a cousin of Sigmund Freud over there in Germany. They must have both come from a rich family. But Edward Bernays bought the sociology, I suppose you might call it sociology, I'm not sure, or psychology, of a man named Le Bon, who wrote The Psychology of Crowds. So you can get it for 99 cents at Kindle. But the basic concept is that so-called democratic man is a creature of his passions. There's no reason. The masses lack the capacity to reason. This is something that all of the intellectuals agree on worldwide. It's one of the things that separates the two worlds, is that if you belong to the world of the ruled, you believe that the rest of us do not have minds of our own. So that's one of the points of departure there, where if you're not one of them, if you think that there's some sort of reason that comes up from the masses, then you're not going to be able to get along too well in academia or anywhere else in their systems, for that matter. But those who violate the two world thesis, and then that's what C.L.R. James, I think, did. That was his basic mistake, because he tail-ended American imperialism. Bottom line, I mean, the guy's still a big-time intellectual. I think he's dissociated himself from the Socialist Party now, and he considered to be one of the leading black intellectuals in this day and age. But C.L.R. James, nevertheless, tail-ended state power. And if you're going to tail end state power anywhere, at any point, any time, then you're through. It's all over. You've sold your mind to the highest bidder, and that's something that I wasn't going to do anyway. No matter how much they could finance me for another $250,000, another $500,000. They're still not going to have a 63-year-old indentured servant to do anything in the way of their bidding. So that day will never come. So the two world thesis. You got the state capitalist thesis, you got the two world thesis. This is your fundamental philosophy that I think everyone needs. And as has been said by others, of course, what I was doing, I was analyzing and it came up to conspiracy, and the more I got into it, the more conspiratorial it seemed, from the Cold War especially, although you can go back as far as you want with that. But my thing was, how did they manage to impose this ideology on the rest of us? The Cold War ideology, which is utter nonsense, and all of this hysteria, all of this anti-communist hysteria, two waves of it. in the 40s, and then again in the 50s. Getting everybody involved. Edward Bernays' theory, if it were correct, that we are all driven by our lower instincts, well, the fact of the matter is, when they get done selling us their propaganda, as Bernays designated his own work, otherwise known as public relations, that's what you've got. You've got hysteria, you've got instinct, you've got the mind of the crowd, and as long as they can control that mind, that crowd mind, doesn't really matter much what the crowd thinks. I mean, the crowd could be socialist, the crowd could be capitalist, the crowd could be whatever you want it to be, as long as they're in the ruler's pockets. So that's who we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be appendages to their machines, and we're not supposed to have minds of our own. And basically, that's what our entire educational system is designed to produce. It's designed to produce new appendages to the machine. Well, we don't all come out that way, and like I said, I was luckier than most. I stumbled into conspiracy theory. I was actually going along quite nicely in complexity thinking and studying chaos theory and complex systems and how they operate and how they function. As a matter of fact, one of the main things I'm here to push is my book. I want everybody to read my book on healthcare, Rethinking Healthcare as a Complex System, What Went Wrong with Universal Health Coverage. It's a subtitle. It's by me. It's on Amazon.com. You can get it for $20. I might have charged less for it, but as far as I was concerned, anybody not willing to pay $20 probably isn't going to take it seriously. Anyway, if you want, you can email me and I'll send you a free copy. So, putting a price tag on the work I could have put a $2 price tag on it for that matter, but it wasn't a matter of greed so much as it was a matter of demanding maybe just a quotidian of respect. I think that work it needs to be major public work. And that's the mistake I made at Walden. At Walden, I'm going to publish every one of them. I'm going to publish all 5 of my knowledge area modules. That was just one of them. But you've got to demonstrate competency in an area of knowledge. Generally, you got to write about 100 pages about 3 basic writers in one of several different broad general categories of knowledge. One is human development. The other is organizational theory, leadership. There's another focus on organization, I think on the level of research methods. I haven't even written that one yet, so I'm not even sure. Yeah, then there's research methods. So there's 5 different knowledge areas, and then once you've just demonstrated competency in those knowledge areas, they give you permission to conduct a research project. Of course, that doesn't mean they're going to pay for your research project, or that anybody in the world will pay for your research project for that matter, but that's the whole idea of getting to be a doctor. You've got to actually conduct a successful research project and contribute something to the frontier of human knowledge. And hopefully, from Walden's point of view, they want you to join their research committee. Well, as far as I'm concerned, the work I did on complexity theory, or healthcare considered as a complex system, was good enough for a Nobel Prize. I mean, if I were Nobel, I would certainly award me the prize. I don't know why not. I really thought that getting in trouble with the Bursar would be a bit easier to weather if I produced the highest level of work that anybody's ever seen. But they don't want that. My CAMs, they call them, knowledge area modules, came out to about 200 or more pages, and you're supposed to keep them down to no more than 100 pages. I don't know if that includes bibliography or not, but to say the least, I did a lot more work than I was supposed to. And also, you're not supposed to shoot for Nobel laureate or Nobel Prize in your doctoral research. You're just supposed to want to become a doctor like everybody else. I think it's a little bit late in history for that, though, because I was plodding along. I had done the human development work. I haven't published that, but I'm going to publish that next. But I was into complex systems, and I got to Karen Silkwood, which was interesting because I was looking at things from the point of view of Yanir Bar-Yam, which he gives some explanation of this difference between democracy and totalitarianism, based on the idea that if you've got a society that is too big to be controlled by one individual, it's basically complex. It's too complex to be considered as anything else than a complex system. Well, all the theories we got boiled down to one thing. That's totalitarianism, and that's whether it pretends to be democratic or not. That's one-man control. One man is capable of running the system. Well, of course, once the system itself becomes too complex, one man can't run it, so it starts to fall apart, as did Russia, as we are doing now. And they can't control it anymore. So the whole idea is to reestablish command and control, which is the military paradigm. But I got to Karen Silkwood because the question came up was, well, when have you got if you're going to evolve a society that is too complex for any human being to even understand, no one person can even basically grasp it, then it gets out of everybody's control. And what kind of a system are you going to have? You're actually creating a social organism, and you can go back to the organicism of the 19th century, but it all, and democratic theory included, it all had one basic flaw, and that was that the social organism so created was not a social organism, and at least not in the complex systems manner, or that would function in a way that would be described by complex theorists such as Yanir Bar-Yam. It's totalitarian. It's command and control. It's one man rule. One man is, it's not so complex that one man can't control it. Let's put it that way. So that's the beginning of complexity. If in fact you're going to create a social organism that is beyond anyone's control, then what kind of a mentality is it going to have? Is it going to have a fascist mentality, or is it going to have a democratic mentality? Well, that was the question. And by the time I got to Silkwood, the question was the idea of collectivism versus the idea of individualism. Actually, they're opposite sides of the same coin. I always did feel that way, even when the Maoists were telling me that individuals and society are fundamentally opposed to each other, and they got that from the Enlightenment. They certainly didn't get it from Mao Zedong or Chinese philosophy, for that matter. One of Mao Zedong's basic missions in life was to completely destroy Chinese philosophy. But so you've got a social organism you created is too complex for any person to control. Is it going to have a democratic mentality, or is it going to have a fascist mentality? That all depends on the element of democracy, and you gotta understand, what is democracy? Okay, is democracy less than half of the eligible voters voting in the elections, even participating in the elections? You're going to call that democracy? You've at least got to have everybody being an informed citizen, everybody being educated to their highest capacity, everybody being familiar with real issues, and they've got to reach some sort of a consensus. Now, if it's by majority vote, at least you've got a consensus there, if indeed your majority is a majority of not just some less than 50% subgroup of the population that considers themselves to have a stake in the system, which is all that we've got. So if that's all you've got, you have reified your social organism. It's an abstraction. It's not a real organism. It's not a real democracy. Okay, that's Yanir Bar-Yan's definition. If it is democratic, then, to say the least, everyone's informed, everyone has equal access to the decision-making process, and everyone gets to decide. We don't have anything like that. The rulers everywhere, two worlds in each country, the rulers everywhere have to pretend like that's what they've got. So that's what they do. They pretend, but that's all they can do, because they're actually ruling, and they're actually assuming that the mass of us are, in fact, have substandard intellects. Okay, we're in Plato's allegory, again, not of the cave this time, but his allegory of the difference between the rules and the ruled. You've got some men who were born to rule, and you've got others who were born to be ruled. Well, Plato's Republic is exactly what Western history established, and that's exactly what's being fought over today. And that's why the left broke up. The idea is, who's going to rule Plato's Republic? Who gets to be the philosopher king? So, democracy. Is it democracy or not? Are you going to have a democratic social organism or not? Why did Karen Silkwood get sacrificed? I mean, you would think that the people who murdered her were, at least they considered themselves to be acting in the democratic interest. Well, by the time I got done with that research, I realized that the Silkwood family was actually one of the lucky ones, because they hired Jerry Spence, one of the great defense lawyers of this century, one of the great civil lawyers, along with Clarence Darrow and others. But he argued in court that, of course, this wasn't the automobile accident where they actually murdered Silkwood herself and stole the documentation that she was ready to turn in to a reporter about the horrible abuses in the so-called civilian atomic energy production at nuclear plants. She was a union leader, but nevertheless, they had already poisoned her by putting plutonium in her milk, and it was found in her refrigerator. So, plutonium in the milk, Jerry Spence argued that to be similar to, or analogical to, a circus that brings a lion into town. This was his closing argument to the jury. He said that if the lion trainer does not meet his responsibility to control the lion, if the lion gets loose and mauls a member of the community, then it doesn't matter how the lion got loose. The fact that the lion got loose means that the circus is responsible for the damage and the pain and the suffering that the lion causes. So his famous line was, "If the lion got away, Kerr McGee pays." Well, you can go all the way back to Richard Feynman, one of our great nuclear physicists and one of the finest minds that ever lived. He died of cancer working on the Manhattan Project. He used to have a ball of plutonium, actually a ball, it was black metal. You could actually pick it up and feel the heat radiating from the metal. Well, he died of cancer. Millions of others died of cancer working in the nuclear industry, both civilian and weapons grade. So, and they've been murdering people with radiation from that day to this. The Manhattan Project was actually the biggest successful conspiracy that was ever gotten away with. I mean, anyone who says that you can't succeed at an enormous conspiracy just doesn't know how it's done. It's done the way they did the Manhattan Project. You put all the specialists to work in there specially. You make sure that nobody knows anything unless they need to, and that nobody thinks about anything but their jobs. And that's your basic concept of bureaucracy, which was Karl Marx's definition of capitalism, as a matter of fact. So, Silkwood family was fortunate because they actually got compensated in ways that, I mean, when they were blowing up nuclear weapons on the desert, it's not that they didn't know that they were poisoning Mormon communities who lived downwind from the nuclear blast, but what they did know is that the wind was at least blowing away from Los Angeles or a major city, and that they weren't poisoning those people. So they were deliberately sacrificing the individual for the sake of the group. And that's how the whole Silkwood matter came up in my research. And then I realized that, well, the cult of the atom, I mean, that's a conspiracy. There was ever a conspiracy. Seaborg was very responsible for that, but it goes back prior to the establishment of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, all the way back to the really Szilard. I mean, Szilard was the first guy first physicist, to say the least, who realized that, holy smokes, this Einstein stuff, that this could be a bomb. And he got together with Einstein. They wrote a letter to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and the rest is history. So, at that point, everything that happened from that point forward appears to be, and in fact is, a conspiracy. I used to be embarrassed. I suppose it was maybe my left training. It certainly wasn't my systems training. It wasn't my training thinking along with the dominant mindset. It was my leftist training, if that's considered to be non-dominant mindset. I don't know, maybe not, but it's embarrassing when you realize that you're looking at history, and that history itself has had major conspirators making things happen, and that it may be the same people going all the way back, as far as I know, to the foundation of civilization, all the way back to the Egyptians. I don't know at what point the ruling families from that day forward would have been overthrown. There was certainly no revolution that ever did it. They took over that part of the world, Iraq, Syria, whatever, and they moved outward from there. But I heard, long before that, we drove humans evidently drove the Neanderthals into the sea, or somehow managed to extirpate them from the face of the earth. But the Neanderthals weren't the ruling class. Who would do it in the first place? Who would do it? It would only be another ruling class, and basically they married into each other more than they killed each other. they only killed each other for the purpose of who gets to be the boss, and that's still going on today. So I didn't come to conspiracy theory just by wading through the internet. What I did is I ended up at the internet looking at complexity theory and wondering why conspiracy theory is the most popular thing on the internet. And so that became a real research question for me. Well, I'll come to find out, and I just reread, I can't believe it, it's not even there. I reread my whole complex systems book. You can buy it at Amazon.com. And Silkwood's not even in there. That's what found me out of the university. That's what got me into conspiracy theory. I actually had to take a year off and study theology after that. I studied academic theology, and I am a theologian because of that. But it took me too long to do the doctoral research, and that's basically why I ran out of money, because I took too much time doing my research, and I wanted to learn a few things, and I had a few crises along the way based on what I was learning. So, like I said, I've been extremely lucky, and one of my reasons for being here is because I'm not going to pay for all that. I don't even think I should have to, because I did all the work myself anyway. What happened? A couple of professors had to read a couple of things that I'm selling you to read right now. Okay, fine. So you pay them $200,000 to read a book? I mean, at what point does this get to be absolutely ridiculous? They certainly didn't teach me how to write the book. They maintain databases that were available for me to do my research on. But on the other hand, I think I can get pretty much the same EBSCOhost database from my local library. Maybe not all the databases that I used to have access to. And that I'm going to consider to be I know I'm going to consider that to be a real loss, especially when I go back to doing fundamental research. I'm going to wish I had all those databases, but you can't even join them unless you're an institution and have institutional money. It's probably cheaper to join an institution and get access by way of membership in the institution. Maybe that's what I have to do. I don't know. I don't have any institutional affiliations right at this moment, and for that reason would not qualify even to do my leadership or any of the other stuff that I would have to do to finish my doctoral degree at Walden. So the other thing is that what I'm doing out here is what it would actually take to finish the degree at Walden. At least I'm not paying them tuition for doing nothing more. $4,000 a quarter, I consider that to be pretty high tuition. They probably got up to $5,000 by now, but that's pretty steep just for the use of some databases, and that's about all that they really did give me. So when I turned this book in, the one I'm recommending everybody to buy and read, which is Healthcare, Rethinking Healthcare as a Complex System on Amazon.com, I turned it in last November, and I really thought I was going to get invited back to Walden on a fellowship. Well, I did a lot more research since then, and I know a lot of things now that I didn't know then, but I think that Dr. Andres, he's the president of Walden, even if he read my work, he was probably hot to get rid of me by that point, because he knew which way I was going, and I don't think that he would expect me to turn into supporter of the Green Initiative as implemented by the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Trade Organization, the sustainability initiative that they are imposing on the world and that Walden is participating fully in. I don't know. I might look awful strange as a member of the Walden research community, but I may never know. I never got to meet too many of those guys anyway. I met, shook hands with one or two of them. They used to do things like at the residencies, you know, oh God, we had a big monster meeting to discuss the election. You know? Oh, Obama versus Romney. Was that what it was? I don't know. Anyway, it was so crazy I didn't go to it. It was just absolutely nutty, as if this were, or, you go to the bar and meet somebody doing research. Well, that's all very nice. Or, if you're smart, you go to your mentor and find a committee that might be capable of guiding you through your doctoral dissertation based on his knowledge of his associates, even if your mentor isn't the person that can help you put your dissertation committee together, or they can do it for you. He can at least introduce you to people who might introduce you to other people who might end up somebody taking interest in what you're doing for a dissertation. But that's all behind me now. What's left though is the research. I did the research. I think the research is important. I'm shooting for a Nobel Prize. I didn't get a fellowship. I didn't get invited back. I got the boot on the butt from the bursar and a $4,000 tab to boot, which is what I owe them in addition to what I owe. Maybe it's more like $4,300. Probably went up since then. In addition to what I owe the federal government, which is another $198,000. So I owe a lot of money. I owe, and off to work I go. Well, this is my work, and this is my way of returning value to the community and appreciation for. It's more than just appreciation, because I think the work is urgent, and I think that my discoveries are important, and I think that they should be shared. Like I said, I charged money for the book because I think people should respect the work, and if you can get it for free, you're not going to respect it. Nothing free is worth having. It's one of the first things you learn in life. However, if you want it, I'll send it to you free, because I'm more interested in sharing the ideas than I am in making money. So at this point, what I want to do is spend the last few minutes reading the introduction, which is also found at Amazon.com on my description of the book. So I've done all the background. Now the only thing to do is to read right off of the Amazon.com site where my book is at. The purpose of this research is to trace the development of complexity thinking as it has emerged in the physical, biological, and social sciences. The modern concept of complexity emerged in the late 19th and early 20th century social sciences, even as the Cartesian Newtonian paradigm was being destroyed in physics by new thinking upon new experimental evidence. Beginning with Fritjof Capra, who started out as a physicist, I show how his encounter with Eastern philosophy led to a new concept of relationship, causation, and function that forms the basis for thinking about complex systems. He projected that civilization would reach a turning point, which J. Forrester's research shows we have passed and missed. Humanity is now descending into the chaos of overshoot, even as our leaders consider mild-mannered espousal of the Sustainability Initiative as part of corporate propaganda for human relations as narrowly defined by the immediate bottom line. Yanir Bar-Yam analyzes the difference between implicit expression of a biological organism, which can enable us to create a general will while fully celebrating human rights expressed as a democratic mentality, or explicit reification of such an organism, with its ensuing fascist mentality as expressed by Hitler's abuse of social Darwinism. That was a mistake up there. It's not a biological organism, it's a social organism. But the idea is that it can be fascist or it can be democratic, depending on the amount of control on whether every human being involved has equal access to the decision-making process. Although we are now floundering in our efforts to create a sustainable social order, one mentality or the other will emerge as the mind of the new social organism. We have a stark choice between New Jerusalem and hell. and we are pretty far down the wide road to the latter. In the following analysis, I will examine the scope and impact of the work of Capra, Forrester, and Bar-Yam within the context of the modern complexity thinking. Capra saw the limitations of the Cartesian Newtonian paradigm in the very physics it had founded, and found the motto of Wu Wei in Chinese philosophy providing illumination between field and quantum physics. He expanded these insights into biology and sociology, never wavering from a new vision of complexity thinking that now informs all of the sciences. He saw the current system reaching its turning point. J. Forrester showed the consequences of overshooting that turning point. His students developed the World 3 mathematical model, finding as of October of 2012 that we are dangerously poised near a point where our social order cascades into chaos. Bar-Yam picks up where the social Darwinists left off, showing the way to a democratic rather than fascist mentality for our new social organism. These theories have generated much discussion, culminating in the proposal to create a learning society through the process of public education, which means educating all members of the public to their highest capacities. The ideas of each of these thinkers are still generating rich new research questions and providing us with the means to use our own eyes to see what is going on in spite of all the apparent complexity of today's world, and will continue to generate research, action, and discussion throughout the 21st century, providing fresh humus for robust new research into the foreseeable future. From the standpoint of the wretched of the earth, the sustainability initiative spells only human disaster because it is being applied by way of the explicit fascism Bar-Yam warns us against. The discredited trickle-down theories of the University of Chicago economists that are now being imposed on what Mao Zedong designated as the Third World can never cause our boats to rise because they are entirely grounded in negative feedback economic equilibrium models that cannot reflect the complexity of today's world. However, such theories can support some lifeboats while all of the Irish in steerage drown. America is intractably stuck in the two-tiered world social order that is emerging, and can only retain her position for the select few by waging permanent warfare on her own people.